Welcome, friends, family, patriots, believers, conservatives of like. Welcome to The Grid, your intersection of faith, politics, and commerce. Okay, Shaun, the federal government, in this particular case, the White House, and even more specifically, the Biden administration, was sued by multiple attorney generals, mostly in red states, makes sense, for colluding and putting pressure on social media companies to filter, erase, delete, remove content that was not to the federal government's liking. So I think we can all point to COVID. There was a lot of I'm going to say anti-vaxxers. My family is not really pro-vaccine for the most part. I would say that varies depending on which member of our family you talk about. But there's a whole nother level of being anti-vax that I guess that is on the spectrum, and then you have the pro-vaccine that if that's on the other end of the spectrum, that if you don't vaccinate, then you're a murderer. So you got these extremes and all this in between, right? Well, it turns out that a lot of the people who are opposed to the vaccines were saying this is not a vaccine. The mRNA is really therapy, it's gene therapy. There's side effects. There's all this things that they put on Facebook that the White House was actively meeting with Mark Zuckerberg, with Facebook. There was emails. There's all kinds of things going back and forth showing how they were colluding with them and X, saying you need to take this content down. And it turns out a lot of that information actually ended up being true. It was labeled as misinformation at the time. Another example would be the Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, that one was also, that's completely Russian disinformation, misinformation. It's wrong. Don't share it. Now, quite frankly, I don't really care about the laptop itself. I don't think it would have changed the election in 2020, but it was showed it was case in point, front and center of collusion of this cartel that we've talked about between social media and the federal government. So the reason I bring this up is the Supreme Court ruled, it's not that they ruled that it was okay for the federal government to do this. What they ruled was the states lacked standing to bring a suit. And that's important because what the government says is basically, if you weren't harmed, then you don't have the right to bring the suit itself. When I read this, for the liberals saying this is nothing but a conservative court, Shaun, this certainly was a liberal decision. And it was, I believe it was a 6-3 decision, wasn't it? If I remember correctly. And I believe the dissenters were Thomas Alito and Gorsuch, if I remember correctly. Thomas is always a dissenter on anything that remotely smells against the Constitution. My favorite justice by far. So anyway, as I read this case, Shaun, principally speaking, I was appalled, and I'd love to get your reaction.
I was ticked. I was smoking hot, and I don't mean good looking. Okay. I was smoking hot. The smoke detectors have been undone from my house. Okay. So this is utter balderdash. We need to have a massive class action lawsuit filed against the mainstream media and name all of their alphabet, give them all their names, and the CDC and the FDA and everybody who participated in saying that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were bad for you, that they were horse medications, because there are thousands of people who were not able to get prescriptions for that because of that nonsense, and they're dead. If you have a loved one that died and was not able to get that prescription because they were denied, even some of the pharmaceutical companies, or not the pharmaceutical companies, some of the big pharmacies were saying, no, we're not going to fill this prescription. You're not the doctor. You are not the doctor. You're in business to fill a prescription, period. And they all need to be sued to bankruptcy, as far as I'm concerned. There are thousands of people who are dead because of that nonsense.
Well,
I think what you were expecting for a response?
I think our audience is going to leave this podcast, Shaun, and probably feel a little bit unclear where you stand on this particular issue. I don't know if that was strong enough. And you're really talking about the pressure from a regulatory standpoint. I'm concerned about the free speech component to this. I don't remember what the statistic was, but I remember months ago, something like 60 or 70 or 80% of people, in particular women, get their news from Facebook or social media. And number one, that's appalling in and of itself. I know that when I read a story, I go to multiple. I typically actually will read CNN, Fox News, Newsmax. I go to multiple outlets to try to see, do I see the same story, because there is so much misinformation out there, unfortunately, and there's misinformation on both sides. My concern is the federal government saying we are the arbiter of what is right and wrong when the government is inherently biased with their own agenda. They are not lovers of the truth and seekers of the truth. And that was clear in this particular case. I mean, we could point to Anthony Fauci and what he did about trying to curtail the theory that this was a Wuhan lab leak for COVID. And he was like, no, it's not. When there was all these back emails and correspondence going on that showed, in fact, that he had plenty of insight that that's exactly what had happened. And anybody that was posting that stuff was getting their Facebook removed, getting their post tagged and deleted. It's that control. I mean, this is I don't often say that's Nazi-esque, because I think that's a pretty big deal when you start connecting our government's activities with those of Germany back in the 30s and the 40s. But how do you not come to that conclusion when you have
That is
that?
what was happening.
Yeah, when you have that
You're
kind
right.
of control and you utilize that control, that is a problem. What's even worse is that I have no clue how our Supreme Court, that is supposed to be an independent branch of government that's supposed to put boundaries on that control on other branches of government, came to this conclusion. I and so with the so when they say that there wasn't standing, what I don't know if that means if somebody who, like you said, Shaun, was harmed because they made a decision based on information that was wrong, would they have standing? I think the problem is that makes the burden really high to correct this. And so not only is it a problem with what happened, I think it now absolutely opens the floodgates. Here we are about to be in July. It opens the floodgates over the next several months for the election for the government to exercise that same level of control around the election itself. That's where my concern is, Shaun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the standing issue just is completely, but it's just balderdash, because there are times when you've got a bunch of plaintiffs, they don't have the money to hire the lawyers to get proper justice, but the state's attorney general realizes that injustice has gone on, and the state's attorney general can step in because their budget allows them to cover things like that, and they go to battle for us.
That's right. So just totally disagree with this. It gives the government way too much power.
You've been listening to The Grid, the intersection of faith, politics, and commerce. Till next time.
Till next time.